So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here for Descendants of the Dragon, Tales from Vancouver's Dragon Boat Festival. My name is Sarah Ling. I'm the Exhibition and Programs Manager for the Chinese Canadian Museum, and it is our pleasure to be co-hosting this evening's virtual program and discussion with Dragon Boat BC. And I'd like to invite my colleague Dominic to introduce himself as well.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in tonight from wherever you are. My name is Dominic. I am the Development Marketing and Operations Director for Dragon Boat BC. You might also know us as the Concord Pacific Dragon Boat Festival or the Canadian International Dragon Boat Festival Society. We have been the producers of the Dragon Boat Festival here in Vancouver since 1989. And currently we operate out of our facility right in Olympic Village on False Creek, pretty close to where our Dragon Boat started about 35 years ago. But before we really get into today's talk, I would just want to start by acknowledging that the Chinese Canadian Museum and Dragon Boat BC both primarily operate on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And for those of you joining us from other places and from other territories, we just invite you to take a moment to reflect on the land that you're tuning in from, as well as the host communities. And also just to recognize the ongoing effects of colonialism. Recently, as many of you might be aware, the remains of children were found at former residential school sites, like in Kamloops and other sites across Canada. Both the Chinese Canadian Museum and Dragon Boat BC are committed to helping create opportunities for cultural dialogue in the hopes of building a much more equitable society moving forward. And with that, Sarah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dominic. For those of you who are new to learning about the Chinese Canadian Museum, we are an organization committed to establishing a permanent museum hub dedicated to the experiences and history of Chinese Canadians across the province of British Columbia. So you're certainly welcome to pay us a visit at our current temporary space in Vancouver, Chinatown, which we will share more about later in this program. But to give you a taste of the work we are headed towards, we do have a little video to share with you called Soul. And I would like to acknowledge that this evening we are also joined by many of our board of directors and staff, including Sonny Wong himself and our chair, Grace Wong. So I hope you enjoy this little teaser of the work to come. Thank you, Whitney. And now Dominic is going to introduce the cultural history of what the Dragon Boat Festival is. And then shortly we'll be inviting our wonderful panelists to give us a feast of stories tonight.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Sarah has certainly raised expectations. I am going to be able to speak to some of the traditions behind the Dragon Boat Festival in terms of its roots and its origins, just to provide a bit of grounding before we get into our panel talk. And for those of you to provide a little bit more context for those of you that aren't as familiar. So the Dragon Boat Festival that we talk about now is related to the Dununzi or the Tuanwujie in traditional Chinese culture. And it's something that really spans a very, very long time. We're talking thousands of years in the past. There's multiple stories to it. One of the more deeper folk stories talks about the time of the Dununzi as a time when serpents and scorpions and all these animals would start coming out of hibernation as people would be going to the fields to harvest crops and stuff like that. And so there is an element of the Dragon Boat Festival of the Dununzi that is a way to pray for good health and to pray for diseases to be lifted. And so here in this panel here, we actually went through and tried to find a couple of really interesting ways to show it. It depicts 5 of the poisonous animals that are associated with the festival itself. So the snake, the centipede, the scorpion, the toad, and the spider, as well as 2 of the plants that people traditionally hung around the entryways of their doors just to ward off illness and to pray for good health. Now, with this version of the story itself, there's a whole bunch of other narratives that tie into it. So there's a tradition where there's multicolored strings that parents would tie around the wrists of their children. In certain communities in Taiwan, they also associate egg balancing with the Double Fifth Festival, with the Tunzi, with Dragon Boat Festival. But that just kind of speaks to a deeper folk legend that sits before one of the stories that most people have maybe heard about. And so on the next slide here, we actually have a picture of, perfect, thank you very much, of Bigyun, Chuyuan. So this is a story that most people will be more familiar with in terms of the Dragon Boat Festival. So the story goes that in about 278 BC, Bigyun was a court official in the court of Chu, and he was pushed out of the court for political intrigues, and he went essentially into exile in a village. Now, this was also roughly the time, one of the stories goes, about the time of the Wong States period, and also there were a whole bunch of different factions fighting for control over China. And so one story goes that the Chu kingdom fell, and when Bigyun heard this, he drowned himself in the Milo River in sorrow. He grabbed a huge rock and he threw himself in. The villagers were huge supporters of Bigyun, and so what they did was they paddled out to the river, beating drums, hitting their paddles against the water to scare away the fish so that they wouldn't eat his body. One of the things that they also did was they scattered rice on the surface of the water. Now, different stories have different variations on this, but roughly this is a story that many people are told. This is a story that children are told in different ways when they grow up. But it takes us to the story of the zhong, which is something that many people probably have seen before or have even eaten. And so on the next slide here, the zhong actually represents the rice dumplings and the rice that the villagers scattered on the water so that the fish would eat that instead of picking his body. And it's a rice dumpling. It can be sweet, it can be savory. There's different variations depending on what area of China you're in. There's different shapes as well. But this is something that many people have seen before. You can pick it up in supermarkets, and there's a whole bunch of places in Chinatown as well that you can pick it up from. Sarah, I think you have a couple of suggestions maybe. But for example, off the top of my head, all the bakeries in Chinatown, like The Boss, Maxim's, Zauma, and also Sunfresh, Newtown. I think I'm missing a couple, Sarah.
Yes, well, if you're in Vancouver, the community has been very excited to support Gamwai or Camwai Dim Sum, which is located on East Pender Street. You can also find some local community members who are making it with younger people in the community and at senior centers. So it's been a nice activity in Chinatown. But if you're not in Vancouver, there are also many local cultural grocers who can supply you with these great dumplings.
Yeah, but these traditions all are foundational to understanding the Dragon Boat Festival. But at the same time, the Dragon Boat Festival has kind of evolved over the years. It's taken its own path, and without giving it all away, it's become its own thing. And there are similarities to the Dragon Boat Festival of the past, but it's also become a Vancouver tradition that evolved from this ancient Chinese tradition. So I'm not going to speak too much more. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and I'd just like to introduce everyone to them today. And I guess I skipped a few. So we will introduce our panelists in a moment, but where this actually evolves into a Vancouver tradition is that in the 70s and 80s, we started seeing a lot of trans-Pacific migration, specifically from Hong Kong, which does influence how the Dragon Boat Festival is now practiced and produced in Vancouver. And so what had happened was that in '86, Expo had a theme of transportation, and the local community banded together, primarily the Chinese Cultural Center and other community groups like the clan societies, but also volunteers. And they all came together and they asked for boats from Hong Kong. And on a winter's day in January '86, we received 60 dragon boats. From there, on Hong Kong Day in June 1986, the first races happened as part of Expo. And from there, Dragon Boat has become its own thing. So on the next slide here, we actually have a picture, one of the few pictures from Expo '86 with the races. And in the background there, you can actually see the US Pavilion, which is where roughly David Land Park is right now. So we will now introduce our panelists. Joining us today is Sonny Wong, former general manager of Dragon Boat BC, and also a current member of the board for the Chinese Canadian Museum. Andrea Zhou, former marketing coordinator for Dragon Boat BC. Elizabeth Wong, director of the Fei and Milton K Wong Family Foundation, and both Andrea and Elizabeth are both daughters actually of Milton Wong as well, who is one of the founders of the Dragon Boat Festival here. But I will turn it over to you all now to take it away. I'll just have you three introduce yourself briefly and add a little bit more if you wanted to.
Who's going to go first?
How about you, Sonny?
All right. But before I introduce myself, there is somebody who is who's here as a guest that I think deserves to be introduced first, and that's Larry Chu. Larry was was the founding race director of the Dragon Boat Festival. Larry was there at Expo '86 when, as part of the Chinese Cultural Center, he helped bring the teak boats over. Larry was one of the pillars of the Dragon Boat Festival, really playing a pivotal and instrumental role in facilitating the partnership between the Chinese Cultural Center and the Canadian International Dragon Boat Festival. I have not seen Larry in many years. So Larry, I am touched to see you, and I hope that you're keeping well. And I think really you deserve a lot of credit for making Dragon Boat Festival in Vancouver what it is today. So I did want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Sonny, and thank you, everybody.
And there are some other people. I think the current chair of the Dragon Boat Festival, Peter Wong, is in the audience as well. So we should say hello to Peter. I'm a marketing guy. I'm a marketing professional. That's really what I do for a living. But I do have another dark side as well, having been involved with many community projects and programs. My entrance into the Dragon Boat Festival is really quite accidental. I was I was on the, I was working for a large ad agency called Baker Lovick. And we were approached by the Dragon Boat Festival, Milton, and a man named Jim Bishop at the time to help with the festival. And they looked around the agency and they said, you're the only Chinese guy here. You're going to be helping to make this happen. So next thing you know, I was on the committee of the Dragon Boat Festival getting it started. But we'll get into the Dragon Boat a bit later. I'm a marketing guy, and we have from a company called Hamazaki Wong Marketing Group. We work with local and national clients. As you already heard, I'm on the board of the Chinese Canadian Museum. I'm also part of the Chinatown Legacy Stewardship Group. I'm on the board of Capilano University, so I am a bit of a busybody. So not accidental in a way that I found myself being part of Dragon Ball, but that's really what my background is. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea then.
Hi, I'm Andrea Joe. I am one of Milton Fei's daughters, and I've been to all the beginning Dragon Boat festivals until I moved to San Francisco. But I, like Sonny, was one of my first bosses, and I worked a lot for the Dragon Boat festivals, first as the marketing coordinator, one of my first summer jobs. It was like a really awesome crew. And that's really what launched me getting into event planning. And that's how I launched my career and interest in marketing. It's a lot of Sonny's leadership, but also the opportunity that I've learned from all these different people along the way that helped make Dragon Boat over the years. So I have a lot of fond memories. You know, our family, they were so excited about going to Dragon Boat Festival every Father's Day weekend. And we have a lot of, we've met a lot of people on the way and lifelong friendships. And I think a lot of you probably feel the same way. Anyway, I will turn over to Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz, Andrea's younger sister. Really honored to be invited today to chat about Dragon Boat Festival. And yeah, very happy to see you, Larry. It's wonderful to see all that, such a big turnout today. I guess I was 9, my first Dragon Boat Festival, and I've only missed a couple of them so far. And so I grew up I grew up with the festival, and I have so many fond memories from when I was little, and it was at the Plaza of Nations, and then to see it grow to what it is today. I was a spectator when I was little, and then in high school I paddled, and I continued to paddle university, and then we also had our family paddling the Wong Way team, and then now I'm involved with Dragon Boat, helping out where I can, just with a bit of fundraising.
Perfect. Well, thank you all three for introducing yourselves. And I guess we may as well just start at the very beginning. How did it all happen? Like, where did it come from? Where is this? How did the Vancouver's Dragon Boat Festival come to be? We might as well cut straight to the chase.
Well, I would say at the dinner table, we would talk about, like, my dad had this idea after going to Expo 86, and we saw the China brought us like the races, the Dragon Boat races from China, and it was like a demonstration sport, and that was really fun and exciting. And then Dr. David Lamb and my dad thought this would be a great opportunity to make it into a festival. And of course, that was during a time where there was a lot of racism then in Vancouver, and they thought this was a great chance to really highlight the performing arts and the culinary arts and visual arts and bring it all together and bring the community together from all different cultures, not just the Chinese culture. So that's sort of how it started.
I'm going to jump in there too, because I used to, David Lamb, the late David Lamb, who was a wonderful man, used to tell this really funny, engaging story about how he got Milton involved in the Dragon Boat Festival. In that they didn't know each other at the time. So, you know, it's like a lot of people, when you think about movie stars in Hollywood, you think everybody knows each other, right? Well, they don't. So, you know, you have Milton Wong and David Lamb. They're two well-respected business people in the community of Chinese descent. And David got the call to become lieutenant governor. And at the same time, he had the idea for the Dragon Boat Festival, and he can only think of one person that could possibly produce the Dragon Boat Festival, and that was Milton Wong. So he got his assistant to call Milton's assistant, and they set up a lunch over at David's house. And David took a lot of care to prepare how he was going to ask Milt, and he decided that, you know, he would ask him at dessert. He'd have the salad, the main course, and they talk about things in general, and that at dessert he would spring the question. But he was so excited when Milton walked in the door that he didn't even make it to dessert, didn't even make it to the salad, and just blurted out, "I want you to organize a Dragon Boat Festival." And David often said, you know, the wonder of it is I was so nervous, but even before the salad, he already accepted. So that's how that I have heard it described as to how Milton got involved. But really, you know, I think Liz was saying earlier about the racism that was going on. So that was the first wave at the time when a lot of immigrants were coming from Hong Kong. So some of you may know the term Vancouver. It was coined at that time. And both David and Milt saw that there was a lot of lack of understanding of these different cultures coming together. And they thought of the Dragon Boat races, about turning that into a cultural festival that, as Andrea mentioned, that had not just racing, but a cultural component, the ability for different cultures to be part of the festival, different foods from around the world, to really create this theme of multiculturalism. And I think that was one of the strengths of the festival, that it really had that theme, that thread that held everything together. And everything that was done really exemplified that. So I think that was the early spark that I think continues to this day. That was on the professional side. You guys have more on the family side. So Liz and Andrea.
I'm laughing here because usually the stories are about how my dad got people to do things they didn't know they wanted to do. And I'm happy you shared a story where he got roped into doing something he didn't know he wanted to do. And it was such a success that, yeah, it's pretty, yeah. Excellent story. Thanks for that, Sonny. I never heard that before.
I can tell you another story another time.
No, also from a paddler's perspective, it's incredible to get in a boat with 22 people and do one thing together and achieve it. And in Vancouver, you're practicing rain or shine if you're one of the hardcore teams, or just a few mandatory practices if you're one of the more relaxed teams. But it really gives a lot of time for people to create such wonderful relationships with each other and partnerships and lifelong friendships, which is it's so much fun. And I was chatting about Dragon Boat with a few friends when I was telling them I was going to do this, and they're like, the beer garden, that's what was important to me. And everybody has a different thing, but and then a different thing about the races that was the best part for them. But then a few friends, we all had different chants about drinking beer after a race, and I thought that was unique to our team, but I guess lots of teams did that, and which was a lot of fun. There's over 200 teams, but the similarities and how much fun everybody has together is it's all the same.
I want to touch on that too, because I think going back to this theme of multiculturalism, that was one of the things that people didn't really understand, in that when you have 22 people in a boat, all from different backgrounds, paddling together with one goal in mind in unison, that the beauty of that unison, I think, is what really held not just the teams together, but that really, I think, cemented this whole idea of different cultures and different people doing one thing together at one big event, and all in the spirit of camaraderie and mutual respect. I think that's one of the things that people don't often recognize as part of the festival. So I think that continues to be really powerful. And to Liz's point on the connections, I don't know how many, but maybe Dominic, you guys can go back in time and do a count. But a lot of people met, became boyfriends and girlfriends, got married as a result of Dragon Boat Festival. I don't think in the early days that would have even occurred to us, but over the years, you began to see and hear so much about that it became a bit of a running joke. I think one time a couple even got married at the Dragon Boat Festival. But the other thing that was a strong connection too is, I think the Dragon Boat Festival was possibly the first time that Chinatown, through the Chinese Culture Center, worked with a downtown crowd, I'll call it, Milton and almost the entire team on the festival side came from the downtown community. So, the downtown community and the Chinese community in Chinatown came together to collaborate to make it successful. And I don't think I'd be lying when I'd say, well, there were some disputes. Of course, there's going to be some disputes, but really, at the end of the day, I think the support and the single-mindedness that everybody had to bring it together made it successful. And I really do have to credit people like Larry Chu, because Larry is one of the integrators. He was one of the people that really helped to create that spirit of cooperation. Of course, you have some people that want things done their way, but there are certain people that I can certainly point to that really made it successful the way it deserved to be.
There certainly were many long meetings over all of this, but I just like to go back and clarify a little bit about the origins of the festival, and because the Chinese Cultural Center, was the sponsor for the first 3 years, and thanks to Milton and David, it became the International Dragon Boat Festival. So there are 2 phases to the beginning of the festival itself. So when you're talking about the festival now, you're talking about how it became an international festival as opposed to just a local thing, because we originally envisioned it as a community involvement in Expo 67. Vancouver City had put out a proposal to communities to find ways for us to participate, and so we looked at at our community and thought, well, what could we do that would be universal in appeal but Chinese in origin?
Larry, I think that's a great point. Right from day one, we cultivated that international spirit and participation. I think I have to give Milton and you and David credit, because we didn't call it wasn't called the Vancouver International Dragon Boat Festival. We were first in Canada. So, we had the balls to say we're the Canadian International Dragon Boat Festival, and not just position it as a small community event, but really to position it as a community, as a beacon for the international community. And by and large, we were successful. Gosh, Larry, I remember in those early days, all the teams that came from around the world. I don't think I've seen the magnitude of international teams as we saw back then. You know, Australians, New Zealand, German, Singaporeans, Indonesians, Hong Kong, the Brits, the Italians, the Americans. Yeah. There were probably more that I haven't even mentioned, but it was just remarkable. The Philippines.
I think I also wanted to talk about how there's an educational component. I think Sonny, it's called Dragon Zone. And I think that was super special. And it was basically an outreach to several high schools in the Lower Mainland and to educate them about the Dragon Boat Festival and promote multiculturalism at the grassroots level. So it wasn't just like an event that happened in June. It really was an outreach deep into the community. And I think that, you know, what is also special is all the different high schools that participated. And so it felt like to me an intergenerational sport. And you know, it promoted, you know, competitiveness in a really positive nature within different, you know, regions, but really like it really gave the foundation to promote multiculturalism through and through on all the different ages. So I think that was a really great initiative. And Sonny, you could probably talk to more about that. So.
Okay, fine, I will.
No, but like for
I think you're right, Andrea. You know, now that we're talking about it, and I haven't talked about dragon boating for some time. When I look back now, what made it so successful was the sheer level of participation. So you have the paddlers, you have the students that you're talking about, the high schoolers. Yes, so we did inaugurate the participation in the high schools to, of course, not just communicate the ideals of the Dragon Boat Festival, but the entire area of multiculturalism as well. Just the sheer participation is what made it tremendously successful. And you're right. But and now that I think about it, it's such a multifaceted event. So you have many different entry points. The one other thing that I often like to say was that it isn't just a dragon boat race. It really is a festival. And the other layer on top of the races was this incredible cultural component where we had performers from all different nationalities participate on the stage. In the early days, we actually even had a craft fair where, again, an international craft fair. We had probably the largest food festival at the time as well, all throughout the site and particularly around the Plaza of Nations. So if you weren't interested in racing, you're going to be interested in food. If you weren't interested in the food, you can come and see everything that's going on the stage, walk through the market area, and just feel the vibe. It was such a magical event. That's one thing I often used to say about the Dragon Boat Festival. It's just so magical. And it never rained. It never rained either, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's especially when Peter Wong's chairman. We call him Sunshine Chairman.
Oh, hold on. Didn't they tell you I used to book the weather?
I think one of the more magical memories that I have when you talk about the magic is, you know, the Plaza of Nations, the closing ceremonies, when you know, the premier and all the, you know, politicians on stage, and just seeing Dad up there, you know, bringing them with the paddle and the trophies, and really everyone was cheering each other on as they were called in. And it was kind of like the Olympics, you know, the closing ceremonies like that. And you can hear the bagpipes. Everyone had their different chants, their different uniforms. Like uniforms were a huge part of it. And like they just got crazy colors, awesome designs, like a t-shirt design competition. And I'm sure it's still like that. And, you know, it was just that the energy was electric. And that truly was so fantastic. I'm sure every paddler that participated in that, or, you know, remembers that.
Now, we have to ask this of Dominic, but you're reminding me of that, Andrea. The one thing that was done when all the teams streamed into the Plaza of Nations, so, you know, 150 teams, 25 team members each, just the electricity of people walking into the plaza. And then when they all got into the plaza, there was a tradition that everybody was asked to participate in. And that is, we had this thing called a friendship paddle. So the friendship paddle will be passed to every single paddler in the Dragon Boat Festival. And it would take, I don't know, 20 minutes or more for it to go. And while that's happening, everybody is just screaming and shouting and injecting so much energy because, you know, of course, it was usually the end of the festival and, you know, the trophies are going to be handed out and everything. But just the euphoria of that moment by having the paddle passed around, of course, it ends up being on the stage. But that tradition and the fact that everybody got to touch it and then it ends up on the stage, I think is a magical tradition that I hope, Dominic, you guys still engage in, because if you don't, you should reintroduce it.
Well, it's actually, so the friendship paddle is different than the lieutenant governor's ceremonial paddle. Right?
No, it's that paddle.
Okay, yeah. So we do a version of it because of just how things have developed in more modern times. A lot of our visiting teams that are flying in usually will fly in on the Friday, and then right after their races, they have to catch a flight back out. So we can't do it with all the teams, although we'd love to. What ends up happening is that there's a couple of dignitaries and there's a couple of representatives of a few teams that pass it around. That paddle has seen a lot of things. It has been shipped around the world. One year when I was behind the stage recently, I won't put names, but a city councilor was using it to smack someone else. And I was like, that is a priceless artifact. Please don't do that. And actually, it was one of the items that for some time, we weren't sure where it went. And there was a bit of fear that it was lost because we did lose a significant amount of records and a significant amount of items in a fire in 2014 at our offices, and also in a break-in that happened early last year. So that is one of the pieces, though, that we've been able to maintain and is actually currently on display at our exhibit at BC Sports Hall of Fame. But it is a spectacular piece, and I won't get into that right now yet. We'll get into that later. But I'm going to switch it around a little bit because, you know, Vancouver was the genesis, I guess, of dragon boat in Canada. And the boats that Hong Kong donated in '86 were sent around to different places. So can you kind of trace out how Vancouver might have been able to help dragon boats spread across the community in this area?
I can certainly address that. You know, we felt there was a responsibility to help cultivate dragon boating around the province, or, you know, even around North America, because we were first. And in the early years, we stumbled into producing the Dragon Boat Festival. Nobody really had an event producing background, so we kind of learned along the way, got good at it. But certainly, when we began to receive calls about dragon boating, and you know, Victoria called, Kelowna, Harrison Hot Springs, Seattle, Oakland, many a Dragon Boat Festival called us, and we wanted to help them, because by helping them, it actually made the Dragon Boat Festival in Vancouver stronger. So, and we were the only ones that had boats. So once we finished with the boats for our festival, we found that we could rent them, not for a lot of money, but because a lot of dragon boat events don't necessarily start with a lot of money, but we were able to rent them for a small amount to help the revenues of the festival, but really to help cultivate dragon boating as a sport in North America. So I think we had a benevolence around that and a willingness to share not just our boats, but the learnings that we had. I think Larry even went to some different venues to help foster some dragon boating in the local markets as well. So we were happy to share what we knew, because at the end of the day, just it made us stronger.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of add briefly to this and maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit more. But so when we were going through the archives, we found even slips of paper from the States asking us here in Vancouver to ship the teak boats down to different communities in the US and even to Alberta. But one of the items that you held and recently passed over, and that we will have on display at the Chinese Canadian Museum, is a poster from the Commonwealth Games. So do you have a little bit of background to that one?
Oh gosh, I forgot what year the Commonwealth Games was, but the Commonwealth Games came to Victoria, and there was, they celebrated one day, they called it Hong Kong Day. And in order to celebrate that, they held a parade in conjunction with the Victoria Chinatown. And of course, we were the only festival with boats. So we shipped a few boats over there to do demonstration in the inner harbor in Victoria. So those boats saw a lot of mileage and saw a lot of sharing. But at the same time, I think it really allowed us to celebrate and share everything that we were doing with the much wider community. Yeah, so the Commonwealth Games approached the Dragon Boat Festival to use those boats as demonstration, because that was symbolic, right?
Oh, for sure. And since we are on the topic of boats, you know, people, this is one of the things that I guess we should start with as well. Like, so what were your experiences with the teak boats way back when? So.
They're a pain in the butt. They're beautiful, but teak, because it's wood, only has a certain lifespan, and in particular, certain lifespan on the water, because every year they would get waterlogged, right? You know, you put wood into the water, it begins to, over time, to absorb the water, and they got heavier. And a lot of, particularly paddlers, when you got to the end of the season, they just didn't want to paddle on the teak boats. Then that's why over time the fiberglass boats were introduced, but they did become heavy. So teak boats are more difficult to maintain. You have to take them out of the water once a year, let them dry out, and of course maintaining them with varnish and that kind of thing. So the teak boats, while they're beautiful and they're traditional, their use for dragon boating has its limitations. And I think, Dominic, you guys don't use the teak boats anymore, but probably have, like the rest of the world, migrated to fiberglass.
We have, they are much lighter, but
maybe Larry can answer that question much better than me.
In terms of what, Sonny?
The teak boats.
Well, you know, the teak boats, when we got them out of stores and put them in the water, they literally filled up with water. So you had to kind of wait until the seams tightened up before the boats would even float. So you're right, they were really heavy and unwieldy and caused us a lot of problems. But you know, there was the whole thing about when Hong Kong revived the dragon boat races as an international spectacle. You know, they used traditional Chinese boats, and those boats were sort of more river craft. So when you start a festival like this, you want it to be authentic, and so it was the sort of the cachet of the festival that we had authentic, you know, traditional Chinese dragon boats, which are still used today. And if you go back to Hong Kong and you see their dragon boat races, they're using teak boats. They wouldn't countenance using fiberglass boats. So unfortunately, I think the teak dragon boats now are scattered all over the province. They were donated to other venues that didn't have facilities, and I think one group volunteered to refurbish those boats. They would have taken hundreds of hours per boat to do that, and the Vancouver Festival simply didn't have the resources or the desire to maintain them. I don't know whether we still retained at least one of the boats. It was on display at the Vancouver Museum at one point.
I may actually have a little bit of a surprise for you a little bit later on, but we won't get to that just yet. We'll leave that for a little bit later on. But just to bring Andrea and Liz into it as well, I think both of you were dragged into a dragon boat team with paddling the Wong Way. And so you would have had firsthand experience of paddling in these teak boats. As a paddler, how was it for you?
Heavy and slow, and I paddled in them when I was in high school, so I was quite a bit smaller too. So it was hard, and your legs jammed up against the side of this wood gunnel, and you're trying to make this massive boat move. All these kids in high school, I don't think I appreciated the history or the difficulty it was to keep those boats afloat. But now that I'm learning more about it, it was, you could definitely tell a difference when you got to be in a race that was the fiberglass boats versus the teak boats. And that's what you're always hoping for, is that you were going to get put into a fiberglass race and not the teak boats. But yeah, but now I have more of an appreciation for the boat itself, knowing how difficult it was to take care of them. But I just, dragon boating was just, it's so accessible for so many people. As I said, that we were scrawny little high school kids, and you could still make the boat move if everybody was in time. And that is also the other magical thing about dragon boat. You don't need to be the fittest person out there. You just need to get into a boat and try your best to keep time, even if you don't shorten your stroke and the boat still moves. It's not a big deal. But it's so accessible, and now they do more outreach to younger kids, and they provide lunch and then take kids out onto the water and give them an opportunity to be on the water in Vancouver, because it's hard. There's a lot of people in Vancouver who live on the water but never experience being on the water. And I'm really excited to see how many different young school groups get to come in and try it, and then be part of a 22-person team.
Oh, my only time really being on a team is when our family had paddling the Wong Way team. And to reiterate, like, it was accessible for so many people. I think our oldest member was my Uncle Bill, and he was like 90 maybe. And
80, yeah.
80, yeah, definitely older, and his grandson was maybe like 15. And so, multi-generations, and, all my cousins with us, it was really fun. And we're not all fit, but we sure knew how to have fun, and everyone could paddle. And then, my other chance was because I usually worked on sponsorship with Sonny and his team, and one of the sponsorship events was called, I think, Splish Splash. And we would give the opportunity to the sponsors to come out, and we did this event. It was really short, but we had these teams where we divided them up in teams so they would get a chance to paddle the boat. And it really is different than, it's one thing to like pay for a sponsorship, platinum, gold, or silver, but it's another thing to get in the boat and to really feel what it's like and how hard it is. And just getting wet in the water. I mean, often it was cloudy when we had that event, or raining, but it really gave them a true feel of what it was like for all the other paddlers out there.
I think we also, since you're mentioning your family, need to acknowledge that your uncle, Maurice Wong, is also in this webinar right now too. So, and I think he paddled as well. But you know, I think one thing I do want to acknowledge is just the amount of resources and energy the Wong family put into this, and really led by Milton Wong. You know, I know in the early days it was difficult, as all startups are, but I don't think people know that Milt put a lot of money into the festival, a lot of personal money. And at the time, he probably thought of it as a big expense. But now, you know, 30 some odd years later, it was an investment, right? And I don't think he thought of it as that. And he thought, well, we spent more money than we had. So yeah, you know what, he was a generous enough, a big enough spirit to say, well, I'm gonna contribute to help keep this thing afloat. He didn't have to, but he did. So I really think that is worth mentioning, and it's worth all of us being incredibly thankful to Milt and the family for having had the wherewithal to have done that. If you asked them back then, you know, do you know what you're doing? It's like, well, no, I don't know what I'm doing, but you know, he felt an obligation and a responsibility. But you know, 3 decades later, we can see the results of it, and it really was an investment, and has become one of the signature activities in Vancouver, and I dare say one of the things that Vancouver is known for. Some of you may know that, you know, we even appeared in Jeopardy one year, when the question was something like, you know, which city, because of its large Asian population, has the largest Dragon Boat Festival in North America? Of course, the answer is Vancouver, right? So I really do think we should all be thankful for Milt and the Wong family for everything they've contributed. It's been great, and we wouldn't have it if it wasn't for them. So again, he probably thought of it as an expense at the time, but now we know it was an investment.
Thanks, Sonny.
You know, Sonny, that's the perfect segue into our next little bit, because, and also, you know, that's a perfect descriptor as well, because considering Milton Wong's occupation as a banker, like you really choose your words well there, Sonny. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna move on to the next section, because we want to leave enough time for a Q&A. There's plenty of questions that are going on here. But we want to show you where this investment's gone, and show you what the festival now looks like from its roots in Expo 86, and then the actual founding of the festival in 89. And then, of course, you know, we weren't able to celebrate a festival in 2020, but this is just a little bit of a highlight reel of what usually happens at our event. Enjoy.
Start the race, guys. When I'm starter, you have the race.
Perfect. Perfect, thank you. And so there were a couple of posters that we were hoping to highlight, but you're gonna have to unfortunately wait until you come down to the Hansing exhibit or our exhibit at the BC Sports Hall of Fame to take a look at those a little bit closer, just because we wanna make sure you have enough time for the Q&A. But where the festival is now is, you know, we've taken this foundation and we're approaching it in that same spirit of bringing people together, building multicultural bridges. But the other thing that we really wanted to do is find ways to bridge the two worlds together of sport and culture. And the way that we approach Dragon Boat now is it's not just a festival, it's not just a thing, it's a distinct entity with roots in Chinese culture. So we want to respect that. And it's an active culture that includes sport. And so when we introduce a festival, we always say, firstly and foremostly, it's a cultural sport, equal foot in both worlds. And I think that that spirit is kind of encapsulated with all of the things that we've been saying earlier in this program. It doesn't really fit neatly into one thing, but it's just people coming together, sharing stories, people coming together, experiencing different things and mixing and matching. And so these photos here are actually from the same festival, and these things are all happening at the same time. On the right there, we actually have Evergreen Taoist Church, who has been doing a traditional eye dotting and blessing ceremony where they summon the spirit of the dragon from the mountains and to the waters of False Creek to bless the boats and to make the waters safe. And they've been doing it for us for 30 or so years now. And on the left there, we actually have one of our local mixed teams. It's a mix of two teams, or sorry, one of our open teams, two of our local mixed teams coming together to race against some of the fastest teams in the world. And so, you know, it's just a perfect encapsulation of who we are and what the festival is now. And just on the next slide here, it's perfect, thank you. We're just gonna jump back a little bit. One of the things that we've been able to do too is just, again, mix past and present a little bit. And so on the left there, we actually have our medal from the 2019 festival. Now in the background there, you see a little bit of a texture. And so over the last few years, the Dragon Boat Festival has been going through a fundamental shift in how we approach the community and how we want to be interpreted and how we operate. And this is partially because of staff changeover in the last few years. But one of the things that we did was, if you recall, at the very beginning, one of the things that we spoke about was the importance of Zhong to the Dragon Boat Festival to do Ningzi. And so in the background of every single thing that you see for the Dragon Boat Festival and all of our cultural events, you'll see the same pattern. And that pattern in the background there represents bamboo leaves that are used to wrap the Zhong together. And so when you come to the exhibit at the Hansing building, when you go to our exhibit over at BC Sports Hall of Fame, when you visit our festival, if you look at the background, it just kind of symbolizes how we want to think of traditional culture being interpreted in a modern way and being the foundation for what we do now. But this also is a perfect segue for me to turn it over to Sarah, because on the right-hand side there, we actually have one of the performers on site at our festival, Hansing Athletic Club, and their building actually is the home of a seat at the table right now. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Dominic. As Dominic mentioned, we are currently hosting a seat at the table, Chinese Immigration and British Columbia, which is the inaugural exhibition of the Chinese Canadian Museum. And I'm proud to announce that just this week, our exhibition was awarded the Public History Prize by the Canadian Historical Association. So I'd like to congratulate our co-curators from UBC as well as the Museum of Vancouver on that accomplishment. But we're also very excited to provide a space throughout the summer, beginning this Friday, to encourage people to reflect on the importance and traditions behind Dragon Boat Festival, as there are many ties to Chinatown and it is an important aspect of Chinese culture. And so beginning this weekend, we will be displaying many special objects that Dragon Boat BC is generously loaning to us, as well as some videos. And so to give you a taste of what you can expect when you visit our exhibition refresh, I'm going to have Winnie play a wonderful interview that Dragon Boat BC held with Danny Kwan of the Hansing Athletic Club. For those of you who haven't been to our current space, We are currently located in the Hansing building in Vancouver, Chinatown. And the Hansing Athletic Club Association was founded in 1939 as part of the Wong's Benevolent Association. So it's a very historic space full of important history and memories. And so this will give you a taste of how lion and dragon dance culture is also an aspect of the Dragon Boat Festival. And this club actually performs annually at the Dragon Boat Festival too.
Hi, my name is Danny Kwan. I am the Dragon and Lion Dance Director at the Hansing Athletic Club of Vancouver. That's my official title. My unofficial title is the Dai Si Hing of the club, and in Chinese that means I am the eldest brother out of all of the entire group, so I look after all of them. This year marks my 36th year at Hansing. The Hansing Athletic Club is a private fraternal organization in Chinatown. We're one of several what we call clan society associations. But Hansing is unique in that our patrons are the Wong's Association of Canada, and they founded us in 1939. We were founded first as a lion dance troupe to raise money for war relief back during the Second World War, to send money back to China to help fight the war against the Japanese. After the war ended, the Wongs had this vision, since they've already established this lion dance group, why not build upon what they did a few years earlier? So they created this athletic club to also include other activities for their members to partake in, such as Chinese opera, drama, Chinese classical music, sports, and of course martial arts and lion dance, which we consider as one department. Dragon and lion dancing, as I understand it, goes back 2 millennia. Dragon lion dancing symbolizes a very happy event that's about to happen. Lion dance just symbolizes everything that is good, happiness, fortune, everything you want in life, but it's just all rolled into this one dance that symbolizes all that. So the lion starts out sleeping, it slowly wakes up. It wakes up with a drum roll, with a series of drum rolls, and then it starts to preen itself, like as any animal would do after they wake up. They lick themselves, they clean themselves, and then they start to really fully awake. The lion wakes up, he sees that there's a lettuce offering for him on the bench, and so he now knows that that's his meal time. So he gets up, he cleans himself off, and then he does what we call his zhaoying. He does his approach for the food. And the Chinese also have a tradition that when you're offered something, you bow 3 times to whatever the offering is as a blessing. So, the lettuce is there, the lion sees it, he looks around to see if there's any competition. When there's none, he bows 3 times to thank whoever put the offering there, and then he does his approach to pounce on the lettuce to eat. I hope to see several clubs like Hansing, either in the Chinese community or outside the Chinese community, just keeping this tradition alive and continue to pass them on to the next generation of youth.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for Winnie for pulling up that video. And I think we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A section. So let's get at it. I just see a couple of questions here. So the first one is, how do the dragon boats get to the festival? And there's actually a whole bunch of questions here. And what are the lifespans of dragon boats? So, Sonny, maybe you can, and Larry Chu, maybe you guys can speak a little bit to how the teak boats used to get to the festival and what the lifespan of teak boats are. And I can speak a little bit more to the modern boats that we use.
Larry's gonna go first.
Oh, you're on mute, Larry.
You're on mute, Larry.
Sorry about that. The city of Vancouver was always, a very big supporter of the festival, and always donated some space in some park or some compound where we could store them. So we had a very large volunteer group to maintain the boats and to move them about. We actually had a trailer, a single-use trailer, about 40 feet long, that we used to bring all the dragon boats over to False Creek and put them in the water every year.
And let me add to that too, in that finding storage for them was not always the easiest task. So certainly in the earlier years, they were stored at the Chinese Culture Center. But when you have 6 boats and they're each 40 feet long, for example, you lose space very rapidly when other programs are happening. So they would find themselves scattered in different hiding places in the city, even under the docks, for example, just off the Concord space. For a number of years, they were stored under the Cambie Street Bridge. I don't know if people walking past would even know that they were there, or just thought they're some kind of wooden debris. So over time, it did become difficult to find storage for them. That was certainly in the early days.
And so in the modern era, with dragon boats, there's only so much that you can really do with a 40-odd foot long thing that's about 6.5 feet wide. And also, Larry, I've also seen your name. I've never actually been able to put a name to a face before, so it's a pleasure to meet you. But so in Larry and Sonny's time, we had 6 or 9 boats to deal with. We now have about a fleet of 18 that we use on the regular, and we're actually looking at expanding it just because of the demand that we had prior to COVID. But we actually go through a pretty similar process now. We are using one of the empty Concord lots right now just to keep all of our boats in. And then we have to load them onto a trailer and then bring them down to Burrard compound, and then we'll load them into the water and drive them in a coach boat one by one all the way down to our docks. Luckily, our facility on False Creek, right beside Science World, has enough space to park a lot of the boats. Usually, if it was COVID times, we'd probably have about 12 boats in the water year round, just for the sheer number of teams that we have practicing out of here. We have about 100 teams that usually practice out of our facility in False Creek. And then during race times, we add a couple more in. But one of the things about dragon boat that's different than other sports is that with other rowing sports and canoe kayak sports, you bring your own boat. And so to some extent, it becomes an issue of, how fast are you, but also how fast is your equipment. And one of the things about dragon boat is you don't bring your own boat, you use a standard set. Everyone uses the same one. And in a way, I actually like that as a racer, because it's not about the equipment you have. It's not about how much money you can spend on equipment. It's just about what your team can do together as a group. And I will just add this now. So the teak dragon boats that were used at Expo 86 were left under Broad Street Bridge for a very long time, and they had unfortunately fallen into extreme disrepair. Dragon boats are very difficult to maintain, but a group did get funding to repair them over time. And in the last little while, we've actually been able to secure them and make sure that there's a home for them with us. And so we actually have the 9, I think we have all 9 of the original teak dragon boats currently in our yard. They are outside, but it allows the wood to breathe a little bit. And so we are treating it, we are looking after them as custodians of the boats for the community. There's something that is integral to the community, and we want to make sure that they're preserved here in Vancouver as long as we can, because it's a critical part of our local culture.
You should name one of them after Larry Chu.
Well, there's a lot of curiosity about these. You've definitely raised a lot of curiosity about these boats. So some related questions are, what are the lifespan of dragon boats? And how long did it take to make a teak boat?
Um,
I
yeah,
actually,
Larry.
sure, I actually went to Hong Kong before in 1985 to take a look at the yards that built the original teak boats, and it was a sight to see. Uh, Old style craftsmen, really strange caulking methods, and so on. And you got to remember that they had to ship them overseas, so that's why we ended up with these dragon boats the size they were. They had to fit into a 40-foot container in order to be shipped overseas.
So to add to that, so therefore the length of the dragon boats that we had in Vancouver are slightly shorter than what they were using in Hong Kong. So that is the uniqueness, as Larry said. They had to fit into a container, so they're a little shorter. Little known factoid.
Well, and you know, one of the things I've heard as well is that because those teak boats were one of the first ones around, they were actually, apparently, according to legend, used as a mold to create an international standard for the racing boats. So I don't know how much truth there is to that, but that is something that I've heard before.
Yeah.
Before I answer the question about how long the lifespan of our modern boats are, unfortunately, Liz has to leave. She just has something that is going on and she just has to jump out for a little bit. But thank you very much, Liz, for being a part of tonight's panel, and hopefully we'll see you soon at one of our programs.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Liz.
Dominic, just to address the lifespan of the boats. Well, you know, these boats now, the original boats are now 35 years old. And teak, if it's treated properly, can last for probably another 50 years. So it's, and I think after, you know, you've told us about the most recent refurbishment, they've gone through 2 refurbishments of the original 9 boats now.
Yep, from what I've been able to gather from the archives, there was one in the early 90s, about 90, 91 or something like that. And then this one would have been in 2017.
Yeah.
For a modern racing fleet, the oldest ones we currently have are about 15 years old. Our standard racing fleet is about 10 years old. And that usually, at that point, the fiberglass starts becoming a little bit more difficult to work with. So we're actually looking at, hopefully, once we can fundraise enough funds, replacing our current 2 racing fleets, which unfortunately is a very expensive proposition. Dragon boats are about $15,000 per boat, and we need 18 of them to run the festival at least. So that's something that we'll sort out over the next little while. Cool. Sarah, do you have?
Yes, I've made note of the earlier questions. So our next one is, and you may have covered this, are there any teak dragon boats currently on display at the BC Sports Hall of Fame?
Yes, there are. So we currently are running an exhibit as well at BC Sports Hall of Fame, partially because last year we were canceled due to COVID. And we wanted to preserve the stories and culture of Dragon Boat in a different way and tell those stories on a more individual, personal level. And as part of that display, because BC Place is operating with such reduced capacity right now, they've generously given us use of their concourse. And we've actually been able to put a full-size teak Dragon Boat with all the dressing, the head and tail, the drum, seat, all original pieces on display there. And you know, this is going to be one of the few times that you can walk up closely to a teak Dragon Boat, look inside it, see all the hand rivets, see all the handwork on it, see actually the restoration, because obviously when something is broken, you can try to repair it as much as you want, but it's also interesting to see how it was put back together. So I do encourage you to go visit it. We are going to be offering free admission to Mark Dunensy from June 25th to 27th, and there will be information sent out in the email after as well.
That sounds like a great thing to see. Our next question, I think, is for any of the panelists. What do you believe to be the future of dragon boat paddling in terms of the potential it holds for being recognized by the International Olympic Committee?
Well, I don't mind starting on that one. I think it's going to be very challenging. I know that even when Larry and I were involved, we made overtures to try to make that happen as well. But I think part of the challenge is, in spite of the fact that dragon boating has been around in North America for 30 years, internationally, it's still relatively unorganized. So, you know, there is no, well, there is an International Dragon Boat Federation, but low funding, lack of organization, it really hasn't had, I think, an opportunity to move forward in a way that perhaps some other sporting disciplines have, because they're just perhaps more organized, been able to gather more funding. So I think the likelihood is not high. And you also look at, well, what other paddling events are there? There are other paddling events, and you know, why would they add dragon boating, for example? I hope it does, but I think the chances are slim. I just to add a bit of a story to that as well. So the lack of organization meant that, you know, we certainly, when Larry and I were involved, we kind of pushed them around. So one year, I think this was 1996, we said we're going to host the World Championship Dragon Boat Festival, and we're going to be the first ones to do it outside of Asia. And yes, we told the international body that we're planning to do this, and they hemmed and hawed, and we said, we're going to do it anyway. So we just proclaimed to the international world of dragon boating that we in Vancouver are hosting the World Championships and the World King. So do we need any sanctioning? Not really. Would they have had an opportunity to say no? Yeah. Would they have? Well, even if they did, we would have done it anyway. So I think the sport needs to be more organized before I think it could find a berth in the Olympics. That's my opinion. Maybe Larry has another one.
I'll go with yours.
And, you know, Sonny, I'll just add on one last thing to that. The thing is, they might not have liked it, but in all the official records, the first Club Crew World Championships was in 1996 in Vancouver, and all other Club Crew World Championships have used that as year one.
I think this next question is for you, Dominic. Does COVID-19 change the way Dragon Boat festivals are planned in the future?
Yes, it does. I mean, this is more of a broader question that talks more to the whole, festival events, everything that is going to happen. But for example, this year, what we're doing already is that we are pivoting what our traditional 3-day festival would look like into a week and a half program of cultural events scattered around the city, different talks, different performances, different exhibits, and we haven't filled out all of the programming yet. It's all work in progress. We're working with Chinatown partners to link different communities together. We're working with different groups around the city. We're trying to work with our Squamish neighbors and also different cultures, I guess, that call this area home. So just in the way that, you know, the first Dragon Boat Festival sought to link together different communities, you know, it was on a 1980s, 1990s of that era multiculturalism definition of culture. And so while that's still relevant today, we want to expand on that and say that, you know, culture isn't just based in a individual ethnic group, as it were. You have to be able to look beyond that, and you have to be able to look at interpretations of culture, whether that's ethnically based or whether that's individually based. And we want to bring all of that out. And I mean, to some extent, even within Dragon Boat, there's different cultures, even if it has a more tenuous relationship to its traditional roots. And all of that is still a valid interpretation of culture. So we're excited to build off of that idea. We're excited to explore where that's going to go. It's going to continue to inform what we do in the future because we think it provides a more holistic view. But that's not to say that we're not having races. We're working right now to see if there's going to be races in September, which is when we're going to be holding the Dragon Boat Festival. It's a bit of an unorthodox date, but it's COVID, so what are you going to do?
Thanks, Dominic. we're just winding down to the last few questions. We'll see who wants to tackle this one, but it's a question. Lion compared to any other animal. Is there a significance for lions?
I do not know. That I don't know.
Well, okay, so frankly, on a more practical basis, a dragon is much, much bigger. And also when we filmed that, it was in probably it was summer last year when there were different COVID restrictions in place. And so we didn't want to bring too many people together. But from what I gather and from what I remember, a dragon is much more of a powerful symbol, and a lion, while powerful, means a little bit of a different thing. I'm not a martial arts artist by any stretch. I think that's the maximum that I can probably go, and there's probably others in the community that can speak much better to this than I can. But for us, we do have lion dances and dragon dances at the festival. When we did the video, though, it was more of a practicality thing with the space that we were working in and with the COVID considerations we had at the time.
Thanks, Dominic. And not to put Mike Tan on the spot, but he's also a member who practices.
I will volunteer my expertise here. Hi, everyone. Mike Tan. I'm the co-chair of the Vancouver Chinatown Legacy Stewardship Group, but also I'm a cultural educator in the form of, having studied and teaching Kung Fu and lion dance in Chinatown for almost 25 years. So why it's a lion specifically, it's similar to there's actually this weird tradition, or I shouldn't call it weird, but this tradition and this story around where the lion came from. And supposedly the legend goes that the emperor of ancient Persia actually sent lions to the emperor of China as a gift. But and they were so well received, and the story of the lions as a symbol of magnificence and power and greatness kind of spread throughout China. And that, but because you could only get, there were only 2 lions in all of China, that they created them out of paper mache. There's a whole other longer story I won't get into of, the whole, why it's related to Chinese New Year and, how it chases evil spirits away. But that's where, the symbol of lions in China, that's where the legend starts from. And that's why but it's related to Chinese New Year, and a gift, between 2 ancient nations as where the symbol of the lion came from, and part of why it's a lion dance, not any other animal.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing your expertise, Mike. We're going to wrap up with the last couple of questions. A few more snuck in here, but it sounds like people are enjoying this storytelling time. A question from Esther. Are there opportunities for families with kids to learn more about dragon boating, but not for competition? As a Chinese family, I like my kids to learn about it in a cultural way, in addition to the physical sport.
I think I'll try and tackle that one. The short story is that we're developing materials still. And so this project that we're doing with Chinese Canadian Museum, and also the exhibit that we have at BC Sports Hall of Fame, are a way to start and build off of that. And Sonny can speak maybe more to what they did in the past as well. But I think one of the problems that the organization has had in the past is that, especially in the immediate past, the people that were running it had a vision of Dragon Boat that focused more on the sports side. And while that had benefits in terms of engaging people, and it was a little bit easier for people to understand the sport, there wasn't as much focus put on the cultural side. And so that's something that we're trying to adjust over the next little while. And this is all, me speaking quite frankly. We want to make sure that the sports side stays there because it's a great asset to the community. It's accessible, it's approachable, anyone can do it, and you can go super competitive. But we also want to find a way to link back the other side so that people have a complete view of what Dragon Boat can be and we can realize its full potential. Sonny, Andrea, I don't know if either of you want to add anything to that.
I certainly I can add to that. I think the easiest way would be through the cultural side, performing arts and that kind of thing. Even though I guess it really does depend on the festival cultural programming and which groups they want to bring in on an annual basis for performance. So that might be a little bit hit and miss. But there is a very practical reason why it's difficult to have young kids involved in dragon boating, and that is it has been, or certainly, I don't know, perhaps you guys do that now, Dominic, but I think you may not, and that is to get PFDs, personal flotation devices, life jackets, for example. For kids, it's more difficult, and the second thing is liability. So if you want to put a child in a dragon boat, there are risks associated, with it. The paddles, there are no paddles that I'm aware of that are made for kids. Kids aren't strong enough really at that point to successfully paddle. So I think there are some practical and insurance liability issues around young kids and dragon boating. So I unless you guys have done things differently, Dominic, well, that's why we have not.
I'll just jump in there because I actually misunderstood the question. I thought it was purely talking about the cultural side and not the physical side. And, things have changed. Part of it is because Sonny the boats that you were dealing with were a little bit different, but we actually have a fully fleshed out recreation program now. So if this were a normal year, our summer camps go down to as young as kids that are 7 or 8 years old. And we actually do a whole range of programs for elementary schools and stuff like that. We probably have about 3,000 to 4,000 kids come through and paddle a year. Part of it, the boats are much lighter than they used to be. We have smaller paddles and we have all that kind of stuff. So we're well experienced dealing with youth. And we actually have youth-specific programs, which I think has led to the paddling community here in Vancouver being one of the largest and strongest youth dragon boat paddling communities anywhere in the world, actually, I'd say, off the top. And I can speak personally because I used to be on one of those high school teams. Some of the fastest junior teams in the world are here in Vancouver and in BC and in this area. And I think a lot of that is just because of how accessible it is. Especially with our docks now too, we've been able to also add the next logical step, which is that people with different levels of ability can actually get into a boat as well. So we have specialty lifts for people that might have mobility impairments. We have various things installed onto the docks just to make sure that people with visual impairments don't go over the edge. Our docks are built a certain way so that people in wheelchairs can also bring their wheelchairs straight down to the ramp. And so, I think approaching it that way, if there's someone out there that wants to learn how to paddle, we have that done. We have that down to an art. But I think where there's room to grow is adding the cultural side back into the recreation and connecting the two fully.
Yes, if I may add a point too, as far as a cultural entry point is concerned, remember that the Dragon Boat Festival is actually an actual Chinese festival on the Chinese calendar. So in the past, there had been some approaches to the elementary schools to put in some cultural aspects as far as a Dragon Boat Festival is concerned. So perhaps that could be one of those entry points if you're emphasizing culture.
Yeah, Larry, you reminded me one year what we did, maybe over the course of 2 years, with all the paddles that were in disrepair and could be used. We put them all into the elementary schools, and the schools painted them, and then they shipped them back, and we used it to decorate the entire site.
Yes.
So that's one example how you could perhaps engage younger people. I see a question in the chat about painting the eyes, the dotting the eye ceremony of the Dragon Boat Festival. maybe we can address that because I think that's one of the traditions that's always really important. And dotting the I's really is awakening the dragon, right? So, with the dragon boats, they're typically they're dormant. They're asleep for most of the year. But whenever the festival comes around, similar to what the video where they have to awaken the lion, we have to awaken the dragon boats. So dotting the I's basically is awakening them, giving the ability to see so that we can go through another year of dragon boating.
And it's about a 45-minute long ritual. And from what I gather from speaking with the Taoist priests, it's a fairly similar ritual to what they've used for many, many years. There's also a flip side to it, which is putting the dragons to sleep, which we haven't done for a very long time. And we're not sure where the knowledge of that is, but it's something that we're hoping to bring back in the future. During the ceremony, they also summoned the goddess of the sea for safe conduct of the races. And that in some way, if I remember my Chinese mythology and my Chinese culture stuff correctly, relates also to the traditions of Hong Kong fishermen, which is a more modern way of how Dragon Boat was interpreted before it moved to Vancouver. And so that also led to a more heavy sport emphasis over time, because what had happened is Dragon Boat moved from China to Hong Kong, and then it kind of branched out into a more commercial side and in a more traditional folk side with the Hong Kong fishermen. But the two kept on intersecting, and it's that intersection of the two that was sent over in terms of the culture, and that most people in Hong Kong would have been exposed to when it was brought to Vancouver. So there's all kinds of different layers of culture built in, even to a simple, the eye dotting ceremony is not simple, but into even the smallest action that happens at the festival.
So we're going to conclude with this final question, and I'm going to ask Andrea to lead this time. But the comment and question is, it speaks volumes how many people have volunteered to make the festival happen year after year. I mean, we've talked about the festival dating back to 1989 and even before then, from the organizing all the way to racing weekend. What do you attribute that dedication to?
I really like the question. I think it's several reasons, but I think the idea is that we all have, like, just like the races, we all work together as one team. And I think that it really was a festival that started with bringing different branches together to make the community strong, and youth sport and culture, like everyone could be a part of it, and everyone did their part. And like when we felt that magic, everyone wants to be a part of that. And that's what I think that really makes Dragon Boat successful, because if you're interested in being a part of it, I don't think there's an organizer or a general manager that would say no. Everyone can take part. So I also think, I know we didn't really talk about it, but the different teams that we have, like the breast cancer survivors, the high school students, I think there was like just a team full of granddads and seniors, and then the super athletic False Creek men's team and the women's team and the mixed teams. There's something for everyone. And everyone took it very seriously. And at the Armory at the end, people had so much fun, and in the beer garden, so much fun. So I think it's just really a great opportunity to build community.
Sarah, if I can add to the committee, I think my name has come up a few times. So
sure.
I want to acknowledge the panel and Liz and her the Milton Fei Wong Foundation. She continues that today. Andrea has always been a supporter. She's been in San Francisco. She's always asked about festival weekends and donated things from Yahoo, and always asked about the gala. Sonny Wong has been like the left brain of Milt. Milt was the right side on the money side, and Sonny knew the right strings to pull. Larry Chu, hey, he would be there at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, Larry, while everybody else is getting ready, behind the scenes. And, you know, Larry things would be going on, but you know that when things were stressful, you know what he'd do? He'd go out and have a cigarette and overlook the water, right? A cigarette would calm him down. That's my story. And to today, we have Dominic and Alexis. They carry on the tradition. They're going to carry on the festival to bigger and better things. And finally, we acknowledged Milt that he basically footed the bill for us to allow us to carry on today. And that's why we're unique in that sense. Nobody else would have. If he had called in the loan at any time, we could have been toast, as Larry said. Sonny, so we carry on today. And finally, I just want to acknowledge one other family member that I think is on or may not be on, but I think Milt's secret sauce was Fei Wong. And I just want to acknowledge Fei that she is important, and just want to acknowledge her for the festival. So thanks.
For everyone that doesn't know, that's Peter Wong. He's chair of the Dragon Boat Festival. Thank you, Peter Wong.
Thank you, Peter. Really glad that you could join and add those insights. Perhaps we'll let Larry and Sonny conclude with their thoughts.
Yeah, well, I wanted to jump off what Andrea was saying. She used the word community, and that is, I think, a word we haven't used. I really believe that's one of the secret sauces of the festival, in that for the 8-week period or even longer that you're involved, you're really part of a community. And yeah, you're paddling, but then you know what? When you finish, you go have a beer and enjoy yourself. So to add to that is this other word, fun. It's just a heck of a lot of fun. Not just dragon boating, but the Dragon Boat Festival. It is just so much fun, and I know everybody on the panel would agree with that. You know, it's one of the highlights, and you know, with anticipation when you go down that you're gonna have fun, and rarely are you disappointed. So I want to add that too. But I know Larry's probably got something else besides his cigarette.
Fortunately, I've quit many years ago. No, I think it's hard to believe that the Dragon Boat Festival has continued on for so many years. And I think we all hope, but you know, like when we look at the history of festivals in Vancouver and how the Dragon Boat Festival has outlasted so many of them, I think that's a tribute to all the people over all of the years who have contributed to it. I've stepped away from it for many years now, but I'm so glad to hear, you know, the things that are happening with it. And I'm especially happy to hear what happened to the original Dragon Boats.
We worked on that one for a very long time. I think we're almost running out of time, but I do want to just echo something that Sonny said and also introduce someone else that's on our call here. Alexis Gall, the current general manager of the society, took over on March 1st, 2020, or a little bit before that. It was perfect timing, just in time for COVID. But I mean, the thing is, once you start doing Dragon Boat, you really can't get out of it. Alexis started, and if you bump into her, she'll tell you her story, but she started here 20 years ago as a college student or as a university student, and she just has been staying, and she's been part of it. I accidentally threw a Frisbee into someone's face, and so I had to run somewhere to hide, and my friend dragged me to a Dragon Boat practice, and here I am like 12 years later, still doing Dragon Boat somehow. And yeah, the culture side is critically important. The competition side is critically important, but our tagline is community culture competition all in one boat. And it's a combination of all of these elements together that actually make it tick. In the chat here as well, I noticed that there's a lot of people dialing in from around the world. Big hello to you all, and thank you for dialing into Vancouver. We have an international paddling community still. Sonny, Larry, everyone that was involved in the past, you'll be pleased to hear that. So thank you for dialing in. Thank you for joining us here in Vancouver. We hope to see you as soon as restrictions lift, as soon as you're comfortable returning here. And we look forward to seeing you here in Vancouver in 2022.
Thank you, Dominic. I think that's a great note to end on. Feel free to stay and mingle as we exit. But again, on behalf of both Dragon Boat BC and the Chinese Canadian Museum, first of all, a wonderful round of applause for our panelists and also esteemed guest speakers, which we weren't expecting, both Larry Chu and Peter Wong. So thank you, everyone. There will be a recording of this program available on both of our websites. So stay tuned for that. I think starting tomorrow morning, we'll give our staff a little bit of a break. And for those of you who join this evening, you will be entered into a prize draw. So you might have noticed that Dominic is sitting beside some wonderful merchandise that Dragon Boat BC offers. And we will be pulling a few shirts from their heritage collection for you lucky winners. So stay tuned for an email if your name is chosen. Thanks again, everyone, and hope you have a good evening.
Thank you.
You.
Yeah.